When most fans compare the Sith of the ancient past with the Sith of the Rule of Two, they imagine a straight line of succession. On one side stands Naga Sadow, Marka Ragnos, Exar Kun, Tulak Horde, warlords and conquerors who commanded fleets, toppled armies, and turned the Force into a weapon of domination and will. On the other side stand the secretive figures of the Baneite Order, Darth Bane, Zana, Tenebris, Plagueis, Sidious, and in this imagined straight line, the Ancients will always appear stronger. Their armies filled battlefields, their sorcerers altered planets, their names carried the weight of gods. By comparison, the Rule of Two looks fragile. One master, one apprentice. If they both die, the line dies. From this perspective of the Ancients, this looked like weakness. The ancient Sith empires could lose thousands and still endure, while the Baneite line balanced on the edge of annihilation every single generation. But the truth is far stronger, because the history of the Rule of Two is not a straight line at all. It is broken, scattered, hidden. When we trace the lineage of Bane's creation of the Rule of Two around 1000 BBY to its culmination with Sidious in 32 BBY, we do not see a smooth chain. We see shadows flickering in and out of the timeline. We see great betrayals and catastrophic loss. We see centuries of silence where the Sith seem to vanish from the galaxy entirely only to return again with full strength. In fact, almost 80% of the Baneite lineage is completely unknown. We know from the opening figures Bane, Zana, and Cognis. We know the final stretch, Tenebris, Plagueis, Sidious, Vader. But in between, all we can find is silence. Centuries where entire generations of Sith are erased from the record. And in that silence, we find the real answer to why the Rule of Two looked weaker than the Ancients. Because those centuries were not filled with conquest and empire building. They were filled with rebuilding, with recovery, with slow manipulation and corruption. They were centuries shaped by one lord's catastrophic betrayal, Darth Gravid. This is the story of the lost 800 years of the Rule of Two. Why the Rule of Two was forced to become something very different from the warriors of the ancient era. This is the period in Sith lore that we know the least about. The 800 years of the Rule of Two. Part 1. The beginning of the Rule of Two. Darth Bane established the Rule of Two in the ashes of the Brotherhood of Darkness. After the ruin of the Ruusan War around 1000 BBY, Bane declared that the Sith's failure came from infighting, from far too many voices grasping for power. His solution was elegant and brutal. There would only ever be two Sith at one time, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. When the apprentice became strong enough, they would destroy the master and continue their line. Bane trained Zana. Zana in turn trained Cognis. Already fragility was exposed, however. Zana nearly lost her duel with Bane. Cognis almost lost her apprentice Darth Millennial, who abandoned the Rule of Two altogether to create his own sect. From the very beginning, the Rule of Two walked on a razor's edge. And after Cognis, the Sith vanished. From roughly 980 BBY to 500 BBY, nearly 5 centuries. We have no records, we have no names. The Sith had become shadow. Part 2. The Great Silence. The first Great Silence is one of the most important gaps in all of Star Wars history. For almost 500 years, the Baneite line disappears. We know that they survived. The very existence of the later Sith proves it. But we have no names, no deeds, no preserved holocrons that tell us who or what they were. What did the Sith do in this great era of silence? They endured. Every single move had to be measured, because if a master and apprentice made the wrong gamble, the line would vanish forever. Unlike the Ancients who could throw armies into battle and recover from loss, the Baneite Sith lived with the constant knowledge that their survival balanced on 2 lives. And yet they survived. They became adept at hiding, blending to galactic society, keeping the dark side alive in fragments and whispered knowledge. But their obscurity meant that when they finally returned to the surface of history, it was in the most disastrous way imaginable. Part 3. Darth Gravid and the Great Betrayal. It's around 500 BBY when the Sith finally reappear in the form of Darth Gravid, a Sith that many of you will know well. Gravid very nearly destroyed the Rule of Two forever. He is the first Sith in 500 years to emerge. Gravid fell into delusion that the Jedi Code could be merged with the Sith teachings to create an order of balance and unity. But instead of enlightenment, Gravid brought catastrophe. In his attempt to purify the Sith, he destroyed relics, holocrons, weapons, and knowledge stretching back thousands of years. Artifacts that Bane himself preserved, holocrons containing the wisdom of Naga Sadow, Frida Nad, and even Ajunta Pal. All of it burned at Gravid's hand. His apprentice Darth Jean fought him in a brutal duel. Though she killed him, she was horribly mutilated. She survived, but the Sith were left crippled. Centuries of accumulated knowledge was gone in an instant. The Rule of Two was forced to begin again, weaker, diminished, scarred. Their rise to power sent back centuries. This is one of the great turning points in all of Sith history and galactic history itself. From this moment onward, the Rule of Two were no longer inheritors of an ancient Sith legacy. They were survivors building from the ground up a new legacy. And in this 800-year gap, we reach Part 4, the Second Great Silence. After Jean, the Sith vanish once again, from about 480 BBY till the emergence of Darth Tenebris in around 200 BBY. Here we have another 300 years of total silence. These centuries are a black hole in the timeline. No names, no records, just the certainty that the Sith endured. But what were they doing in this hidden age? They were rebuilding, collecting what scraps of knowledge they could, embedding themselves into guilds, corporations, and planetary politics, learning patience. The Sith of this era had no armies, they had no temples, they had no holocrons filled with ancient spells. What these Sith had was survival, and the determination that one day that they would reclaim what was lost. Part 5. Fragility and Arrogance. From the perspective of the ancient Sith, this was weakness. To them, the Rule of Two was madness. One master, one apprentice. If both died, the Sith are gone. And indeed, Darth Gravid nearly proved them right. Gravid's madness almost ended the line forever. But the ancients had their own flaw. Their flaw was arrogance. Take Naga Sadow, for example, who fled into a war with the Republic. Naga was convinced that the sheer numbers of the Sith and the sorcery that they wielded would overwhelm the Jedi in days. But the Republic was a damned fortified and unyielding. Sadow hurled his forces against it again and again until they broke. The ancient Sith empires were always undone by their own egos, their infighting, their arrogance and strength. The Bainite Sith had no such luxury. They could not waste lives because they only had two. They could not afford reckless wars because discovery meant annihilation. Every move had to be calculated. Every risk had to be measured. Where the ancients relied on arrogance, the Bainites were forced into patience. And now we reach Part 6 of this blank era, the evolution of Sith power. This patience reshaped the Sith entirely. Instead of warriors, they became manipulators. Instead of empire builders, they became infiltrators. Instead of commanding fleets, they commanded senators, bankers, and guilds. Their studies of the Force reflected in this evolution. Some studied biology and midichlorians like Plagueis. Some studied mathematics and probability like Tenebris. Some delved into alchemy, sorcery, and spirit binding. And eventually Sidious perfected the art of political corruption, turning the very Republic into the Sith Empire. The ancients were stronger on the battlefield, but the Bainites were much stronger from the shadows. Part 7. The Final Triumph. From Tenebris to Plagueis to Sidious, the Sith finally emerged from their silence. By this point, they were no longer a warrior people, they were shadows wrapped around the heart of the Republic. Darth Sidious did what no ancient Sith ever could. He destroyed the Jedi Order, he turned the Republic into an empire, and he ruled the galaxy as a Sith Lord. This era of time fascinates me so much because many fans don't realize just how large of a gap there is in the Rule of Two history. Again, we really only know about 20% of their stories. While it is true that in the Plagueis novel, the Dark Lord reveals that he has lived a life much longer than a standard life would have existed in the galaxy. But still, there are centuries of doctrine and lore missing. We are missing roughly 80% of the entire story of the Rule of Two. Most of the Sith's rise to power is still a complete and utter mystery shrouded in shadow. So with that, were the Rule of Two Sith really weaker than the Ancients? On the battlefield, of course. They lacked the raw armies, the artifacts, the overwhelming sorceries of a Sith empire. But the true story of their weakness lies not in power, but in history. Gravid destroyed their inheritance, centuries of knowledge was erased, and for 800 years the Bainite Sith flickered in and out of history, enduring in silence, rebuilding from nothing. They were fragile. They were always one failure away from extinction. Imagine what the Sith would have looked like had Darth Gravid not done his great heresy. Imagine how much sooner the Sith would have risen. But in fragility, they were forced to find their strength. Where the ancients were reckless, the Bainite lineage was patient. Where the ancients wasted themselves in arrogance, the Bainites contemplated every single move with great care. And in the end, it was the rule of two, the supposedly weaker iteration of the Sith, who achieved the dream of every ancient warlord, the destruction of the Jedi, and the conquest of the galaxy. This is the secret of the lost 800 years of the Sith. The ancients may have conquered worlds, but the rule of two conquered the galaxy. But anyway, friends and lore junkies, what are your thoughts on this? Had you any idea how much of a gap is missing in the rule of two heritage? When we think of the rule of two, it's easy to think of them as Tenebris, Sidious, and Plagueis. But thanks to Gravid, and Darth Sidious being extremely tight-lipped, we are missing so much history. But anyway, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the archives here again today, and as always, may the Force be with you.